You know, we usually think about history in big chunks, right? Like decades or entire wars. But every now and then, a single year comes along that feels like an entire era just collapsing in on itself. Well, 1916? It was exactly one of those years. It was this total pressure cooker of patriotism, fear, and violence, and it ended up changing the United States forever. I mean, just think about this for a second. What if I told you about a year where an enemy nation successfully blows up a military depot right in New York City? And at the same time, a mysterious plague is quarantining entire cities, branding houses with these terrifying public warnings. Oh, and a bomb goes off during a patriotic parade on Main Street? Sounds like a movie plot, right? Some dystopian novel? Nope. This was all real. And it all happened right here in America in 1916. Okay, so let's set the scene here. At the beginning of 1916, America was, well, desperately trying to keep its distance from the Great War that was tearing Europe apart. The whole national mood was this determined neutrality, this idea that all that chaos over there could, stay over there. And this idea, well, it pretty much defined the whole moment. President Woodrow Wilson, he built his entire re-election campaign on this one single powerful idea. It was way more than just a slogan. It was a promise. A promise that America's sons wouldn't be shipped off to die in some trench in Europe. And people, they loved it. The thing is, though, that promise was already starting to crack. Because here's the thing. While America wasn't officially in the war was, without a doubt, coming to America. That whole illusion of safety, it was about to be completely shattered by a series of just violent, shocking events that would prove just how vulnerable the nation really was. Just look at this. It's like a rapid-fire sequence of disasters. First a raid from Mexico, then a domestic bombing in San Francisco, and then a massive act of foreign sabotage in New York. The war wasn't on the horizon anymore. No way. It had just kicked down the front door. So that first big crack, it appeared in March. The Mexican revolutionary Pancho Villa, he leads this raid right across the border, killing American soldiers and civilians. And Wilson's response was immediate. He sent 12,000 U.S. troops deep into Mexico. For a country that was supposedly out of war, this looked a lot like a full-blown military expedition on foreign soil. And then the violence turned inward. In July, over in San Francisco, they're holding a Preparedness Day parade, to rally support for the military. And then, in this absolutely horrific twist of irony, a suitcase bomb just explodes in the middle of the crowd. What was supposed to be a show of strength became this scene of total carnage. It was the worst act of terrorism the city had ever seen. Okay, and if that wasn't enough, just 8 days later, something even bigger happened. Look at this number, 2 million. That's 2 million pounds of ammunition and explosives. And all of it was just sitting there, stockpiled at a huge munitions depot in New York Harbor, just waiting to be shipped over to the Allies in Europe. The power we're talking about here is just staggering. At 2:08 in the morning on July 30th, all 2 million pounds of it just went up, a colossal explosion. The blast was so powerful, it actually registered as a 5.5 magnitude earthquake. It shattered windows all across Manhattan, and people felt it as far away as Philadelphia. Can you even imagine? And here's the kicker. This was no accident. The Black Tom explosion was a deliberate and successful act of sabotage. It was carried out by German spies right here on American soil. And they didn't just blow up ammunition, they attacked the nation's most iconic symbol, riddling the Statue of Liberty herself with shrapnel. The scar from that night is something you can still see today. Literally. The damage to the statue's arm and torch was so bad that it was considered totally unsafe for visitors. So to this day, over a century later, you still can't go up into the torch. That attack back in 1916 left a permanent mark on the New York experience. So as if foreign sabotage and terrorist bombs weren't enough, the summer of 1916 brought a completely different kind of fear. This one was silent, it was invisible, and it targeted the most vulnerable among us. It was a summer of plague and pure panic. 6,000. Just let that number sink in. That's how many Americans, mostly little kids, died in the devastating polio epidemic that swept the nation that year. New York City was ground zero, with over 2,000 deaths there alone. It was this terrifying, mysterious disease, and the public health response, well, it was extreme. Can you imagine walking down your street and seeing this sign nailed to your neighbor's door? Health officials would literally placard the homes of infected families, turning a private home into a public danger zone. This wasn't just a warning, it was a form of public shaming, a kind of scarlet letter that completely isolated entire families. And this whole system just reveals the incredible level of social control at the time. To even leave a city like New York, a child needed what was called a polio certificate. And the process was super invasive, and it really brought out these deep class divides. A note from your family's private doctor? Nope, not good enough. You had to be inspected and certified by a state official. And even then, you might get to another town and find vigilante checkpoints that would just turn you right back around. And just to cap off this absolute summer of terror, it felt like nature itself was turning against people. A series of shocking shark attacks along the Jersey Shore left 4 people dead in just 12 days, and it created a total national panic. It was this primal fear that just added to the feeling that nowhere was safe, not even the water. And yeah, this was the real-life event that would eventually inspire the movie Jaws. So, you've got the country reeling from violence, reeling from disease. Its entire future is just hanging in the balance. And on top of all that, 1916 was also a presidential election year. And the divisions in the country, they ran way deeper than almost anyone realized. And that election, it came down to a razor's edge. It was so close that on election night, a bunch of newspapers actually got it wrong and declared the Republican Charles Hughes the winner. Hughes literally went to bed that night believing he was the next president. But it all came down to California, which Woodrow Wilson ended up winning by less than 4,000 votes. The country was split right down the middle. And this really gets to the heart of the contradiction of 1916, doesn't it? On the one hand, you have Wilson's winning promise. He kept us out of war. And on the other hand, you have the reality of the year, a foreign attack on U.S. soil, troops being sent to Mexico, and domestic terrorist bombings. The slogan was, well, a comforting story in a year of really brutal facts. But amid all this chaos, all this feeling of collapse, something else was happening under the surface. Even as the nation seemed to be cracking apart, the labor movement was making some huge gains. Just look at this drop in average weekly work hours. Back then, a 6-day, 60-hour work week was pretty much the norm, but that was changing. The 8-hour day, the 40-hour week, things we take for granted, were finally on the horizon. Real progress was happening right alongside the panic. So, when you put all these pieces together, the violence, the plague, the nail-biter election, the social progress, you start to realize that 1916 wasn't just a year of crisis. It was more like a crucible. It was the year that really forged the modern America we live in today, with all of its strengths and all of its vulnerabilities. And the legacies from that one year are just profound. Think about it. In the middle of all that chaos, the National Park Service was created. The first woman was elected to Congress. That's 4 years before women even had the national right to vote. The Great Migration of African Americans from the South to northern cities really took off, completely reshaping the country. And in direct response to that sabotage in New York Harbor, the Espionage Act was passed, which basically created the foundation for our modern national security state. So 1916 really shows us that these periods of intense fear and division can also be times of incredible transformation. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Does a nation only discover its future when its present is on fire?